Now, the topic tonight, as you would have seen, is a bit about looking at management consultants and how boards fit together, where they complement each other, how we see it working for businesses, in particular family and private, which is mostly our space that we're dealing with, and of course you probably come across a lot of it as well, and also giving you a background who we are as an organisation and what we do, and perhaps how that might be of interest to you. It will be interactive. I will be asking some questions, so also if you do have some comments to make, or if there's something you want to share, or have some questions to ask, please feel free to actually do that. I just sort of put this up a little bit because we like to put a bit of context around where we fit. This is actually a testimonial from one of the advisors we work with in our space, and also looking at what we're really trying to create, bringing boards into the family and private space, and also working with you. And it's about providing more long-term clients, which is a big thing. From a bank's perspective, we do find risk mitigation is important, but from your perspective, personal risk mitigation, I'm assuming, is quite important as well. You wouldn't want to be called out as being a shadow director in a business that you're working with. Deepening the client relationship and also being part of a longer-term solution, and I will cover how that's actually achieved throughout this. I just thought I'd put a nice photo with that just to highlight passing the baton and actually working together between what you guys do and this is what we do. And one thing I like to do first up is actually dispel some of the myth that exists generally, which has it's a bit of an attitude of, well, do you have either or? Do you have a director, or do you have a consultant, or do you have a director, or how do you actually look at this? And when we have conversations with clients, and in particular our view is there's of course room for everybody, and how we look at this is we like to view businesses as boats, and every boat has an owner or multiple owners who generally tell you where the boat should really be going. So whether you're going to go to Fiji or New Zealand or wherever that might be, the owner makes a decision where it's going to go. Every boat has a captain, one captain. In family businesses, what's the biggest issue? 2 sons, 2 captains. So that's a big issue. You can only ever have one. Your staff really are the crew, or the crew are the staff. Your passengers are your clients. And what we like to have a look at is if you think about direction being set for this boat by the owner, we're going to Fiji. Your coaches are responsible for getting you the best captain and the best key crew members that you can possibly have. As far as upskilling people to actually get the job done, this is what they're there for. Consultants are there to make sure the ship's actually seaworthy. All the different processes, all the bits and pieces need to be right. It's about making sure it is in top shape and it continues to be. So fixing up the bits and pieces that need to be fixed up. The board is the navigator. And your independent director becomes the head navigator, particularly if it's a chair role. And so if the captain says we're going to go to Fiji, it's the board's or the navigator's job to actually work out how we're going to plot this. And if there's a storm that we need to get around, the head navigator and the captain are going to get together and make sure that we get around this and end up still in Fiji, not somewhere completely different. And as you can imagine, the captain can't actually be on the helm 24 hours a day for 7 days. So it's important that the message and the navigational piece actually filters down through the organisation. So the board is the navigator, your job is to help with the ship. So if you think about all the different project works that's there in the business, that's exactly what that's about. And that then makes it also very clear that's one of our biggest challenges in conversations we've had with family and private businesses. How do you actually separate the ownership and also them being directors and management out? Because that's actually really quite important. So, as you would suggest, this is actually where we come into play. This is really where we work. And this is where you work. And you can see how all these areas need to really be looked after and need to fit in together. Otherwise, you're going to have a complete disconnect between the different functions within the business. Any questions at this point or any comments? No? So I did mention that you can't unfortunately eat the whole time. I'm going to start asking you some questions now.
Is this driving you wild?
I just have food envy. So from my perspective, when you work with family and private businesses, what are some of the challenges that you come across in your role as management consultants in that space?
The management is just too busy keeping the business going to do any sort of planning.
You have to excuse my whiteboard writing. It's not a German thing to be that bad, but that's just the way it is. So too busy for planning?
Too busy for planning, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, too busy for planning. That's really what the is, but you just have to bear with me.
No succession and exit strategy.
Yeah.
Lack of trust with a lot of family.
That's an interesting one.
Or lack of trust with family members. And it's just the, you know, that like you're working with family business, but you're also doing counselling for this. I've got to prove to my daddy that I'm good enough to take this business over.
I know that John can actually share quite a few stories about this, but he can't be leaving right now. But, yeah. Anything else?
Lack of systemisation.
Yeah.
Systems. Yeah.
Let's kind of put lack of systems.
Yep.
Reluctant to pay outside help.
Yep. Why do you think that is?
Because it's their money. And they don't want to let go of ownership. Yeah, to delegate anything because they think they can do it best.
Right. Anything else that stands out? Well, that's pretty much covers it.
Skill. Government skill.
The lack of.
Lack of. And I think that's what I'm trying to say. There is currency around some of the key issues of governance.
Keep sitting about.
It's actually fundamentally the same things that we come across, and often why we get introduced to businesses in the first place. And in particular, succession exit tends to come up quite a bit. So Duncan can certainly talk about the lack of trust in the family space. He is on a board currently where exactly, or the non-family rather in this case, where exactly that occurred, and ended up with somebody having to leave the organisation without any wrongdoing. But certainly with a lot of innuendo and people telling stories, and it actually prompted us to run our director development session this month around what to do with ghosts in the family business, and actually trying to work out how do you actually, as a director, particularly deal with the conversations that shouldn't really be happening, and the distrust and the rumours that actually take place. And it's very, very difficult, and certainly through the discussions that we've had, sometimes you just can't win that space, which is a real shame. This is actually the site that was supposed to prompt me into this, but we've already done that part. One of the things from our perspective is that a lot of those areas that we're actually looking at certainly fall into your area of expertise. And in particular when you're looking at lack of systems, that certainly I would assume is something that you will, I'm not sure, I know that you've helped with. Certainly the reluctance to pay might not be necessarily what you cover, but helping businesses with the systems, with the consulting, with the coaching elements, and also with the advice pieces that you provide to actually help them be a more enduring organisation is really quite important. And we see certainly your expertise coming into business as being very valuable. The issue I think sometimes that you might face, I'm not sure if you agree with me on this, do you find it difficult sometimes when you have all these fantastic ideas and solutions that you're coming up with to actually see the implementation happening? Is that a problem? Yeah. And you try to push them as much as you can, but there's a point when you have to stop that and you keep coming back to the same issues. Would that be about right?
You can leave the horse for water.
Yeah. So what do you do?
You can try a different tack
Yeah.
and see if there's another way.
It's
I think
not
what I'm trying to do is set a really low hurdle that they can be successful at, rather than trying to get them to get to the end game. We just try and break down these such small steps that even an idiot couldn't follow.
I like that. It's actually quite good. So you were going to say something about
Yeah, my experience is that you've got to be talking to the right person. Like I was doing a project, the general manager was actually the son. And, you know, we had great ideas, just super ideas, good plans, but then he had to go to his father who controlled the money.
Yes.
I should be talking at that level rather than at the general manager.
The decision maker and the one who holds the purse strings.
And it's particularly complicated, as you said, in the family space, actually trying to get the father to recognise the skill set and the responsibility that the son really should have, and trusting them enough to make the right decisions. Certainly tends to be a bit of an issue, regardless of if the son actually has the ability to do it. Dad likes to keep control of business, absolutely. Any other comments?
This is a very good antidote to that.
There is.
And that's to give them the old man all the money. Give them the money and telling them to pin off. Let the young blokes have a go. You've done your bit. Here's your dough.
Yeah, we've got a solution to that too. It's a little bit longer, so let that
If
play.
they can actually find the money to pay it now.
Well, that's an issue.
Yeah. Any other comments around that? Observations that you have when you're trying to provide services to, in particular, the family business space?
Very much along the lines of John, is having regular, small, incremental goals, and you don't move on to the next one until they've achieved the first one. And the communication of actually saying, before they actually reach the end point where they're supposed to produce the outcome, how are you going with this? Oh, well, I haven't started. Why haven't you started? So that's where it comes back to the coaching. So there's a lot of coaching involved in getting outcomes out of the consultant.
Yeah. Which can, I guess, at times be a bit frustrating, I'm sure.
No.
No? Yeah, loves it. So we have to say, okay, we recognise that your services and your solutions are actually really important to this business. So what can we actually do to try to help with these solutions actually being implemented perhaps a little bit easier? Now, I think we all know, and how many of you here are on boards? And Di told me, just maybe a show of hands on boards. How many of you? How many on family boards? It's an interesting space, isn't it? Certainly we all understand that the benefits of the board are around stability, perspective, enduring culture, sustainability, market maturity, strategic thinking, and certainly in the space that we work in, our view is the board needs to be about 80% strategic think tank and 20% the compliance piece. And the most important part, of course, from a board perspective and what an independent brings is the accountability piece. That is one thing that as consultants, unfortunately, you can't do. And we like to sort of sometimes phrase that with, you have all care about that business, absolutely, but of course you don't have any responsibility with it. A director on that board has all care, and as you know from the other board roles, all responsibility. And that sort of brings with it the ability to actually enforce a bit of accountability. The interesting thing is that when we talk to family business owners, generally what they actually do want is somebody to hold them accountable. That is the thing they're actually looking for. Somebody who can hold their feet to the fire, as Duncan likes to say, or really make them follow through on these decisions. And it's really difficult to actually do when in an advisory capacity, because if you overstep that mark, from a shadow director provisions perspective, do you want to take that risk? And is that really the position you want to be in? So from our perspective, the way to look at it is to actually underpin what you're doing through a board and let the board be the accountability platform that can actually help that process of implementing some of the solutions that you're providing, and have somebody up here who's going to be the mean person, is probably the best way to put it, who can actually say, well, Leo's come in last week and has given us this to do and we're supposed to do, but next week what has actually been done? Because that is the director's role, to actually make sure that these things are followed through on and catching up and mentoring people from their side to actually make that plan. And naturally the board is also the strategic conversation forum where decisions around engaging your services are also going to be happening.
So how do you suggest we do that?
Get to them.
Good question.
Yeah. Naturally, one thing I should probably say up front is you can't ever do both. You can't be the consultant in the business and the independent director. It is not possible. Because A, there's a bit of from a conflict perspective, it's really difficult. And B, also, how does the business know which role you fulfill at which point of time? And it creates a lot of confusion. And it also might create a bit of, sometimes you might be in the director point space, but then you might just as quickly be you really do confuse the business. You need to separate the two out. So if you're in a family business that things where you think that you might benefit or they might benefit from bringing a board to play and independent, we're going to talk about how you can work with us to make that happen, and vice versa. That is actually an addition that you have for your own career. How do you actually work with us? But fundamentally, you can't do both. So there needs to be a separation between those. So what does the board actually bring is that it does bring the accountability piece to our performance. One thing we do know is, and I know from my uni days, and I'm assuming you all be the same, if I ask you, when would you do your assignments if you had, your son could probably tell us this right
In the
now.
2-week extension.
That's exactly my point. So when you think about the businesses you're working with and you have some tasks that are to be done, so you can implement some of the solutions that you have, when do they do it generally? So if you say to them, look, we really should have this done by the end of March, when do they do it by?
20th of March they start.
Do they actually do it in March? They start in March? Do they actually all do it in March?
When you remind them.
When you remind them? Maybe Duncan can share some experience around some of his boards that he's been on, but when you're a director in that business and you have skin in their game, so you take all the responsibility and your house is on the line with that business, you have a much better ability to actually say to them, it's not good enough. I take the risk, I take none of the upside because you're the shareholder, you're the owner, you take all the upside, I take all the risk with you, not good enough, this was to be done, when is this going to be done? What's the next thing you can do to get this to where we need it to go because we've all agreed it's going to be done by the end of March. The conversations change a little bit and I think that's why we sometimes say all our directors have to have a bit of a pinch of arrogance. You need to know who you are and what your role is in that organisation. That's the conversation that you need to have with them. And as an advisor, it's a bit more difficult to do that. Because they say to you, well, how can you talk to me like this? What right do you have to talk to me like this? I'm paying you. You know what, if you don't want to work with me the way I do, I'm just not going to pay you anymore. As a director, it's you're a peer of theirs and you take the risk so you can push them. And that is exactly what it brings. And that is the part that drives performance. So yes, they do their homework generally, last minute or lately, they're asking for an extension, which is usually when they want to move a board meeting, because they actually haven't done their homework. Generally what happens is if they know that their independent director is coming tomorrow, they probably do some of their homework tonight. Is it the best work that they can do? It's probably not. Is it a step in the right direction?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Because if they weren't coming, they wouldn't do it.
That's exactly right. So it's actually about driving. You've given them all the great solutions, and now you've got somebody who's actually going to come in and make sure it gets implemented so we can actually move this organisation along. That's really what it's about. Which ultimately provides a more sustainable and stable business, and it actually provides a succession planning platform because you can have conversations at board level also that revolve around reviewing and revisiting not only the estate planning, not only the insurance component, which is usually what people look at, most importantly, from my perspective, the one thing that always misses out in succession planning conversations is the human element. If you don't engage your future shareholders and the family business in particular in the conversations around what's going to be happening when Dad exits finally, when you pay him enough money to get him out of there, and Dad actually dies tomorrow, what's going to happen? Sandpit feuds are going to erupt. You did this and you did that, and I said this and he said that, and nobody really knows what direction should be taken, and you're going to lose possibly the business at that point if you're very unlucky. So getting the board to provide that platform and actually engage the future shareholders is very important. One thing we often find is when we talk about succession planning and exit, people's thoughts often stop at the exit point. They're just thinking about how much money they're going to need or what they're going to do at exit point. They very barely consider what actually should happen after that, which is generally what's important to the person coming into the business. Yeah.
How do you handle clients who come from a culture that does not foresee succession in terms of, when you talk about succession, you're literally talking about their demise?
Yeah. It depends on the people you're talking to. In a family sense, we often find when we start having a conversation with them about family legacy and what it actually means to them and what they really want to maintain and what they want this business to mean for not just them but for the next generation, the generation after that, that often actually starts their thinking around their recognition that this is not all about them. This business doesn't end with them, the business should continue. And often that's when their thinking changes to trying to actually make it work for the people who come after that. Touching on getting the dad out of the business, one thing we also quite successfully do is in these conversations with families is the biggest issue that dad has usually is, and you probably have seen this all, this emotional attachment to the business, and it's his baby and he's been there, he's built it, and it's really important to him, and he feels that if he hands it over to the next generation, he's going to lose control altogether. So what we tend to do is we come in and we bring an independent share into that business, because 80% of the times when we become involved, there is no board. I mean, they might have a board by name, but not certainly by function. And we appoint an independent chair and say to Dad, look, let's do this. It's going to be a 2-3 year journey to mature this board where it's actually functioning and it's securing, and the value and culture of you and your organisation is actually captured within that board, close through your organisation. And after 2 or 3 years, when we've reached that point of somewhat maturity, you will become the independent chair of your own board and to still have a control component, and that's when you actually step out of the executive function. And they sort of think about this, and it sounds good in theory, so they sort of also like the idea of having a board and a chair because it's a sign of maturity for them. And what actually happens is, over the next 2 or 3 years, they see this person turning up for half a day board meeting and then for some mentoring and is available on phone and does some site visits. But really only just turns up once a month for this board meeting, but has absolute knowledge on what's happening in his organisation, is all asking all the important questions, and actually seems to be in control together with the board of what's happening in the organisation. And for as far as Dad's concerned, goes fishing or whatever else for the rest of the month, or for the other 29 days, that's all that person does. And he starts to realise that to have control of an organisation, you don't need to be in here and do this all the time, you can actually be up here. And they learn that through the process that we actually take them through. So I'll talk a bit more later as to what we do, but our approach very much in this space is to have a softly guiding them, taking them on this journey through our associate directors, and that's people who have an interest in this space and becoming directors, who don't have an interest necessarily in the listed space for very professional.
So how would you use consultants and coaches in that process?
How would we use them in this process? Well, from our perspective, if you put a director, and sometimes people say, why don't you have an advisory board first and then you bring an independent director in? Our view on this is, we like to bring an independent director in early on. And the reason why we do this is to bring the accountability into the organisation and give them another ears and eyes and somebody with an independent perspective who can actually say, you know what, I know you don't want to pay for somebody to come in to provide strategic advice and give you some of the tools that you need to make this work. But from experience, I know, as your independent director, I've seen this. I'm not telling you this because I'm going to be doing this work. I'm telling you this because I know from working with organisations that to succeed in your way to your succession planning platform, you will need this and this and this. You need your accountant to do this and your lawyer to do that and your banker to do this and your consultants to provide the different pieces that the director can't provide. Why? Because they're there to direct, they're not there to do. That's not their job. Which I said before, you can't do both. You can do one or the other. So directors actually need you to provide the pieces that are actually required to build the succession planning platform and build the new. They actually can't do it alone. From our perspective, one of the things therefore that's important to us is to know the people who we can refer our directors to or refer to. When a director is on the board and says, I need a strategic consultant, I need a management consultant, I need somebody who can do this, who can I go to? And what we do as an organisation, apart from actually helping find the right directors, we also help finding the right advisors along the way. And we don't have any commercial arrangements, we just recognise you for the professionals that you are. And we need you to be involved in that, because our directors can't do the doing, they do the directing. So it's one or the other. Does that make sense? I was going to get to it the next slide. Thank you for the prompt, because I might have forgotten, otherwise it would be terrible. Apart from that, the board is, of course, the forum for strategic conversation. That's where it all happens, and naturally, as consultants, often you become that visitor to that board to actually be involved in that process, because your input is quite important. And of course, it is the platform for actually introducing and sustaining change. And that's what we were talking about before. Remember, the platform you're providing the services that provide the directional piece, the platform is actually supporting you in doing your job.
Isn't there an item missing there? Where's the financial component of it? Like, I think a lot of family businesses suffer because they don't have anybody saying, where's the budget?
Yeah.
What?
I think it's those first
Most
two.
directors will actually do exactly
I
that.
think it's the first two.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting because we were just talking at our accreditation day. The reality is you quite right. Often businesses actually lack the complete understanding or ability to do something with their financial. They will rely on the independent director to come in and help them A, understand it, but two, also find the people who can provide some of the, whether it's the accountant taking a slightly different role, or whether it might actually be that the accountant does just tax and needs somebody else to actually fulfill that role. The director will actually help engage and find and make sure that the right information is actually being delivered to that board. And that's why we're saying it takes time. It takes time to come into a board like that, or non-existing board. And we know this. When we talk to our incoming clients and we do due diligence on them, there's often not much there, apart from really hard-working people with a successful business and they've grown, who are completely exhausted because they're lacking all the systems, and they often also don't have the trust to somebody else, but they know they need some solution, and they like the fact that an independent director has skin in their game, and that will be their first step, which will then filter through to you through work that's actually going to be generated out of that board.
Yeah, so I think that you need another point there to demand management accountability for. So the example I talked about, there was a board, but like it was it still is. It's a very successful bar. They've got a number of bars and a number of gaming rooms and things like that. Very profitable. And the board is simply getting around for a couple of rents.
Yeah, that's not unusual.
Are they looking for an expert?
And, so there's no actual board, although it exists, is not saying, where's the budget? So my proposal, because I'm in IT, so I said, look, to do the governance of the IT systems is going to be $50,000. Oh, we don't have that much budget. They'll have to go to the next board meeting, but there was no budget to compare. So I think the board needs to provide that.
Well, first of all, they don't really have a board, really. They just have a piss-up meeting occasionally. And that's not really unusual at all. But technically, if you think about how a board should function, they have a get-together where they talk about a few things, but there's no real outcomes, no deliverables, and for me, that actually doesn't constitute a board meeting as such.
So sort of like a non-advisory board.
Yeah, it's like a non-board really, but it's just a get-together. So what they really need is somebody who's got to come in there and start cleaning that up and actually start doing some of that stuff and making sure the financials are there and making sure they actually budget. And it is quite fascinating. We were invited to talk to a family business in the mining services space, and they turn over about 100 and something million. And you'd be surprised at the lack of systems and their family business, family board. It's no different. But at least they had a bit of discipline about getting together on a monthly basis. But they certainly lacked a lot of the strategic elements, some of the financial understanding. Their CFO for that organisation was the brother-in-law, who might have done like an accounting degree, but we had no idea what he was doing, because the CFO function is very different. And so it actually took, we supplied them with a non-executive chairman, and they also had an additional independent. And the process to take this business through, to start recognising professional services needed for this organisation, actually one of the things we did within the first half years, we actually provided them with 3 names out of our network of people we know to do strategic consulting to them. Because their strategic plan, when I asked them, was, well, my brother who does marketing, he puts a bit of a thing together, and what's wrong with that? That was their strategic plan.
It's a worry, isn't it?
It's a worry, but somehow successful despite themselves.
Yeah.
So as I said, to actually get them to take on a proper CFO function and pay for that, to take on a proper legal function and actually pay for that, to take on some of the other functions and consulting services they needed and pay for that was a battle, but it happened. And we presented with this particular owner together at the FBA, Federal Business Australia Conference, and he talks about what it's actually done. So they've turned, their revenues sort of increased a bit, but their profit margin, like if you have a look at their net profits, actually hasn't moved much because of the additional expenses through the CFO, the lawyer, and the consultants who've been coming in. But one thing they've recognised is they've now actually created a platform for the next level of growth, which they otherwise wouldn't have had and wouldn't have been able to cope with, and they wouldn't have spent the money on it unless they had that independent perspective to actually get them to understand why they need to use your services and some other services, and actually why they have to pay for it, what it's actually going to mean for their own future. So it becomes a quite important part, and that's the same with the financial components. It's, oh yeah, I make money, I've got cash flow, there's money, I've got $2 in my account, what do you think, what's the problem? So it takes a bit of educating, and that in itself, there's, you need the right people for the right organisation. I'll touch on this a bit later. So as I said before, it was very much about complementary services. So an independent director provides accountability, and then some accountability, and then probably some more accountability, apart from what they actually do from a governance perspective and strategic roles. So it's about looking at an organisation and recognising, as you said, the huge gaps around their strategy, their financials, and their overall risk mitigation, and then working with them to try to get the experts in at the right time, because remember, that's not what the director does. And quite clearly is that they do not do any advisory services, any consulting services, or any hands-on solutions. That's not their role. And if I catch any one of my directors doing some of that, they're going to be in a lot of trouble, actually. And we've had this with one of our lawyers who said, they do require a lot of legal work. If I do that type of work, should I just bill this through my company directly? And my first thing is, you will do no such thing. That is the last thing you do in that organisation. You cross that line, you'll lose respect. And what I mean by that is they get completely confused with what your role is. And you're going to lose the ability to enforce the accountability that you need to drive forward in that organisation. So we're very, very clear, you do one or the other. And what you do is, if you need a lawyer or if you need a consultant, you get your best competitor in. At least you know whether they're doing the right thing, and you make sure that it's paid correctly. But you make sure you get the good people into that, and you have the ability to assess that actually. So there's a real need to have the right advisors and consultants to provide long-term sustainable solutions for businesses. The director, I don't care how skilled and experienced any one of the directors in my pool is, they can't go it alone. Absolutely impossible. There's no way they can do it. What it means for you can remain the trusted advisor on that board. You provide the right solutions, the right services without having to actually take on the risk, which is probably an important component for all of you, the P&I insurance issues. You don't want to take on the risk as a shadow director, and you also leave the accountability driving to the independent director. You just get to tag along basically and get the benefit from that. And your services and the advice you're providing are actually supported at board level. So it's not just you having to try to convince them. You actually have somebody else who's already told them that this is actually a necessary service to help them with better planning, the right systems. I'm not sure about the counselling. I think that's a specialist skill that we all need to have in family and private businesses. And also some of the other issues that they have, that you actually can give them the right solutions for. You actually have somebody who's already told them that they need it. It makes it a whole lot easier. And from your perspective, well, two things. One, if you help your clients implement a board, you actually learn through that journey yourself, and also taking on director roles on other boards. But the one thing, as I said, is you cannot be the director and the trusted advisor both on the same business. It's just not possible. Make sense, I guess? Yeah. What it means to your clients really is, if you bring a board into play and the independent director, you actually maximise the investment in your services. Why? Because you can give them all the great solutions that they've just paid for, and if they do nothing with it, then what's the value they got out of their investment? And whose fault is that in the end? Probably yours, even though it's not. If you think about their viewpoints, you charged them $20,000 for the month before, and you've gone through a strategic evaluation and facilitation, you've got a great outcome that you need them to implement, but you've got no way of driving it. And then a year down the track, they may go, I had this whole strategic thing, nothing really ever come out of it. But no, Leo did really do a good job. But poor Leo actually did do a great job and had no ability to push them to do that. So it's about maximising the investment that they have in you and your services and ensuring that the hard work you've done is actually being carried out in the correct manner. And that's the execution component, so that needs to be enhanced through your services and sustain those through the board's roles. It's really trying to work together much more closely to make sure that the great work you do is implemented and that the accountability is there to drive that and for you to actually help the directors deliver the right solutions. And what it also does is some of the conversations that you're bringing to the organisation, at a particular strategic level, you actually now have a wider forum and different perspectives and people can actually engage with. So it's not just you talking to the son, it's actually you coming in on the board level and presenting and talking to dad and the son, and some of the executives are actually going to be involved in the process. So your audience is much broader, and therefore the engagement process and the understanding of what you're trying to achieve is actually now through much broader and more and the right audience realistically. So it's really about aligning advice and inputs to the business through a board and governance function. That's really what it's about. How do you introduce a board to a business then if you think about your family and private clients? Our expertise really is to help businesses look at a low-risk path to help them on this journey, and this is really our passion as well and what we're particularly good at. The one thing we do is that we just do that. Family private businesses is really what we want to look at and focus on, although we do occasionally get involved in the not-for-profit space as well. We do not consult, advise, or sell a system. What we do is help them understand how a board functions, what the outcomes should be, where they should find themselves, and more importantly, how does it actually help some of the issues that they have. And the issues that we talk about here is their language is like, I can't get dad to bugger off. And I'm ready to take on this business and I can't get him to leave. Or the flip side, my sons are really no good, I just don't really trust them at all. And, how am I going to make sure that they run this business properly? Or I need some more money and I can't get the bank to lend me anymore. How do I facilitate this? How do I get the right governance structure in? Because that's what they've told me, I have no idea what it means. How do we actually do this? What we do is, we come into a business when they refer to us, we explain the journey to them, we take the scariness out of the word governance, we get them to understand it's about them, their business, their culture, their values. It's about tying all the advice pieces together to make sure that when we want to go to Fiji, you're on the journey, the accountant's on the journey, the banker's on the journey, the lawyer hopefully not too much, because they're too expensive, we don't want them there too often, right? And then we help them find an independent director. So what's the most important part when you think about an independent director in the family and private space? Do you think, is it the industry experience, or what do you think is the most important part? Looking for
probably general strategic knowledge, strategic thinking,
Any other? Yeah, that's very important. All directors have to have it.
The culture and values, this is how we do things here, and this isn't about us, this is our family business, which would be really at the core of what we are.
Cultural fit. Cultural fit, when you think about a business that's never had a functioning board before, what do I need an industry expert for? So we've got a bunch of winemakers, which is really our preferred client. We want them all to be winemakers, and we want to sample the produce to be able to understand exactly what their culture is all about. So you've got a bunch of winemakers. Why would you want to get them another winemaker to the business? How many more experts do you need around the table? Or would you rather have somebody who's got a really good cultural fit, strategic, governance, and also leadership skills, who comes in and actually challenges their status quo? And when you ask the question, why do you actually do your wine like that, or why do you have more wine? Oh, we've always done it like that. That's an answer you get often in the family space. We want somebody who comes in and challenges what they do, not in a negative way, but just asks all what you might want to call the stupid questions about their organisation and learning and assimilating to perhaps come up with some innovation. Because, especially in this day, the business that doesn't innovate is often the business that dies. And you can't innovate if you keep doing the same thing, and you would all know this. So it's about bringing somebody in who's got good strategic skills, good governance skills, great leadership skills are good, and also who can be a good cultural fit, because the first 2 or 3 years of the journey is about being able to work together and softly making sure that they come along this journey without scaring them with the best practice approach. So I'd like to sort of say, if you think about the ASX space, and how many here have done the company directors course? Were you all scared afterwards about taking on boards? When you think about corporate governance in the listed space, best practice is up here. We like to say that every one of our directors has a line they will not cross. And it is hopefully just above the legal limitations, but it is there. You're moral and what you believe in, you will not cross that line. Where do you think family businesses operate? They're here, a shade of grey. What do you think happens if you try to pull them up too quickly? You're going to lose them. So it's about coming into a business and saying, okay, we can work together, understand your culture. This is the mess we're dealing with. You know what? You have really no governance skill in your business. You're really too busy to actually plan. You're constantly down here. You're not really looking at the business. You have no succession or exit strategy in your business. There's a lot of distrust between family members and there's just a whole lot of issues that you've got. We do actually have directors we had one particular one who came to our director development session and said, well, I went to my board meeting last Friday and I spent the first 2 hours doing marriage counselling. I really wasn't prepared for that. That unfortunately is also part of being a director in that space. They've got a lack of systems, they've got all sorts of other issues that they have problems with. It's important to have people who can work with that, come in, understand the risks that they take, and then bit by bit start fixing that up. Not all at once. Let's be strategic about this business. Let's improve performance. Let's head towards VG, and as we go, bit by bit, we're just going to clean this up as is appropriate for that business, because you certainly don't need every policy and every bit in every business. So it's about having some empathy. It's about understanding that, in the ASX listed space, it's all about the shareholder. Your responsibilities for the shareholder first and foremost, and the family and private side, or for family space in particular. Think about the stakeholders. Think about their family. Think about their community. Understand that their staff is really important to them. If you keep driving a hardline governance line, you're going to lose them. So for us, our real approach is to say, we understand our directors, we work with our directors constantly, we're not a database keeper. Every one of our directors comes to an accreditation day. We had one earlier today. We get to see them talking and in action. We get a bit of a feel for who they are and what they do and what they've done. And then we ask them to come along and actually tell us more about themselves through our director development. So that when we talk to a family business, if you say, well, you know what, I've got a business like this, I probably should have a board alongside what I'm doing, or maybe this is going to be very complementary. We will work with them, we understand who they are, we understand their culture, their values, their risk profile. Often that's a bit of an issue. And then we have a look at our director pool and work out who of the people we have, 2, 3 or 4, 3 or 4 of those we can put forward as candidates. And we let them choose, and we actually find somebody who can work with them. And most importantly, for us, it's about the best fit for that business when we talk governance. It's not about best practice, as I said before. How do we then engage with them? Something that's very different about AMPLIFi is we do not charge the businesses at all for the work we do with them. And that probably sounds really strange. So we meet with them, we talk with them, we understand them, we set expectations and provide them with some education around boards. We get due diligence through them and their financials, and we help them find directors from our pool, and we take them through the interview process, and we don't charge them a cent.
How do you make money?
Good way. On the other hand, we've got directors on board, which is you and people like you who come with us and are coming to talk to us, and we put them as associate directors. We take them through the accreditation and through our director development, and we invite them to our events, which I mentioned before, and we do that free of charge because we're not a database keeper. But what we do is when we find Di a role with Graham, with your business, you decided to take Di of all the people we've shown you. At that point, actually, we will take a percentage retention of your fees. And what that means is we actually involved in the process in the long term. We only get paid if you're happy on the board and if the business is happy with the outcome they're getting. We have no fixed term contract. So it ties us in fundamentally with that business, and therefore our interest is we need to support our directors and our businesses with the right type of advice when they need it. What good am I as an organisation if somebody comes to me and says, we really need a good management consultant, we need somebody who does this, and I say, oh, you have no idea. Go find them yourself. that probably wouldn't really fly too well. So it's important to us to know the people around us who we can draw on when our directors and our businesses come back to us and actually ask for help, and they do. They do come back to us. Because one thing we say to businesses, when you get an independent director, they have their own networks, and they should bring their networks to help you. In the same way that you bring your networks when you consult your business, but they also come with our networks, because we have a lot of people that we talk to as well. So that's what we do from a business perspective. How does it look from a commercial model? People always ask, how much does an independent director cost? What do I have to pay? And it really depends. The industry average in Australia is about $3,000 a month.
Sorry, how much?
3,000. But the reality is, if I've got a $5 million turnover business and a $150 million turnover business, do you think they should have the same type of director and pay the same? That'd be really silly, wouldn't it? Why would I need an ASX experienced full-time professional director who would like to have paid $60,000 a year at a minimum? It probably wouldn't work. So we have the ability to help the business understand what the investment should be. They need to pay based on their risk and complexity. The higher the risk and complexity in the business, the more experienced the director has to be. And the more experienced the skilled your director is, the more you have to pay. The interesting thing is that often, depending on the business, but as you would appreciate, during the floods, there were businesses that were actually successful businesses before the floods who were really struggling, and we did have directors who were happy to come in basically on an almost no-fee basis for a certain amount of time to just help them on the way, and then we can look at the fee arrangements later. We have been able to help businesses as small as about $1 million turnover, and we actually now just been asked to work with a listed business. We've got 100 million market cap, so it's sort of two completely different ends of the spectrum and really not quite family space. But we do really have the ability to cover and work with businesses of all sizes and all shapes and all industries. We talk about the self-selecting concept, because who are we to tell mum and dad that if this is what they want to do to help them with accountability, that we can't help them? I'd say there wouldn't be many directors now who couldn't take on. If it's something they're passionate about, then we want to work with that.
Why don't you tie the remuneration to the benefit? Why don't you look at some stock options?
Yeah, it's always interesting. And sometimes, that obviously from our business model perspective, if people are being paid through stock options, obviously we don't get paid, but that's okay. We're happy to sometimes make that happen. The one thing we generally say also is if you hold equity in a family business, there is a risk to that. And the risk is that as long as you're non-executive director in a family business with huge amounts of lending, the bank will probably try to get you to sign a personal guarantee, which you wouldn't do and tell them I'm a non-executive director. Why should I be signing a personal guarantee? As soon as you hold equity in that business, there's a fair chance that you will have to sign a personal guarantee to the bank because you're a shareholder of that business, and you just have to ask yourself if that's a risk that you're going to take on. And if you're comfortable, then that's your decision. If you're not...
Having said that, major shareholders will normally demand a seat on the board anyway, but big major listed companies.
Yeah, absolutely. But we, as I said, 90% of our space or 80% is family, 50% is private, 5% is non-profit and listed, so 85%, 82% or so is actually family space.
The moment you take shares, though, you cease to be an independent director.
Yes, that's another issue. And of course, then you start getting to the arguments. If it's less than 5%, you're still deemed to be independent. But I have the same view as you have. As soon as you're a shareholder, your drive actually changes, or your perception of what you're trying to achieve will change. You're not really truly independent any longer. I agree with you on that. And if that is the case, if you've been in the business for 2 or 3 years as an independent and they love you so much they want you to participate as a shareholder, maybe that's the time you've got to get another independent. That's the right you want to take. Yeah.
You mentioned not-for-profits. Do they actually pay independent directors?
Should they pay?
Do they pay?
Well, they often don't. I have an opinion. Sam and Duncan, we both have opinions. Sometimes they clash, and it's great when you work in the same organisation. My take is there are a few of them. If you don't pay for directors, I think sometimes you don't value what they have to say. And also, you will have a lot of people who will view this as just something they do but they don't take seriously because they don't get paid for it, so they make as much time available as they can, but when it comes down to it, they have other interests. The non-for-profits we've worked with, we've actually said, look, we're happy to help, but I want you to pay, even if it's just a small amount in line with what you can pay. If you want to professionalise your board and you want somebody who's actually going to take their job seriously as an independent director to help you with that, you need to pay them. Because I want them to feel committed to your board. I want them to do the best job they can. And I sometimes feel if you don't, I mean, I think you're just going to lose some of the professionals. You should at least have one paid share on that board to fix things up quick sometimes.
And you tend to get people putting hands up who may not necessarily have the skills that are needed.
Often you get people who are really passionate.
Yeah,
and passion is a dangerous thing. It can be dangerous.
Without the objectivity and skill behind it.
Well, I'm looking at a conflict between not-for-profit directors and independent directors paid, whereas the rest are not. Just like what you see, many of them put up their hand and say, no, provided my time.
Yeah, but then you need to also, and I agree with that to a certain extent, but if none of the other non-for-profit board members have actually got any governance skills and any ability to really take the risk out of that non-for-profit board, then I think they probably understand that. If you say to them, look, your mums and dads, for example, or wherever you've come from, and you have a passion in this space and you have a skill set that relates quite clearly to what the organisation is about, you all take risk. So would you rather get paid and take the risk, or would you rather do what you do and have confidence and actually understand what you need to do to mitigate the risk? Because a lot of non-for-profit directors do not understand the liability they will take on as directors of this non-for-profit board they actually get into out of pure passion for a cause. And I think for most of them, they actually be quite happy for somebody to help fix it up and get paid for it. I know I would be probably. Sorry. Any other questions at this point? As I said before, we will invoice our clients on a monthly basis. We will on-pay the director's percentage, and our recovery is really only happening if you're or the director is successful in that business. So for as long as we can get it right, we get paid. We have no contracts because what's the point? Shareholders can remove directors, so we can't hold them contractually obliged to having you there for a year, whatever it might be. And what actually happens is family businesses really understand this. So when we talk to them and say, this is why you should have a board, you need an independent director to drive accountability and performance and to support some of the other elements you're already looking at, they generally will ask you, first of all, what does it cost and what do I have to commit myself to? So if we can take the barriers out of that for them, we make it a whole lot easier to engage. And the interesting thing is that all our directors are still in the businesses we put them in because it actually works. So we don't have to force them to be there. They're not contractually bound, but they see the benefits and the performance improvement they actually feel from having an independent director on that board. So we have to back ourselves in getting it right. I'm sure there'll be, I haven't had it yet, but I'm sure there'll be a time when I get a phone call saying, why did you give me Duncan? All he wants to do is drink wine. What happened? You promised me a board like that where you just get together and talk about stuff and drink. Anyway, so therefore that's really our role. So we are a mediator in that. And also for our directors, there are times, in particular in the early stages when we put a director into a board where, as you can imagine, the business is excited about getting a new executive in who's going to do all their work for them. And the independent director is trying to say, whoa, this is my role. And sometimes to try to get that right, we often become very involved in doing the mentoring, the guidance for the directors to how to have the conversations, because that's always an early stage issue that we work with.
Just a question, Suzanne.
Yep.
So you supply directors throughout Australia to...
Yep, absolutely. Admittedly, we have to service areas like Adelaide or through Melbourne or Sydney at the moment, although we do have somebody who's looking at coming on board in Adelaide. But Perth, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane and the surrounding areas, we just from our perspective, just to sort of wrap it up, the business will always need subject matter experts, and your directors are not your subject matter experts. The advisors are. The directors direct and have an overall business knowledge and ask all the right questions to actually get to the right solutions at the end. But they do need experts. And therefore your voice is actually really important. And as I said before, it's actually you have a voice to the wider audience. You're not just talking to one managing director, you're actually talking to the whole board, which is generally all your stakeholders or shareholders that you really need to address to make sure that they understand why the expertise that you provide is the right one and it's actually pitched at the right level. And as we said before, consider your own director career. That is something that you want to embark on. Make sure you talk to us about that. You certainly should not be doing director roles in your family businesses or in the businesses you're working in. So if you do have businesses that you're working with as consultants where you say, actually professionalising this organisation through a functioning board would actually be a real benefit, not just to me as a consultant to provide services, but to that business in the long term, come and talk to us about it so we can actually help find an independent director to work alongside you, because it's not a job that you can do, and vice versa therefore. If you have an interest to be a director, we could utilise you on other people's boards. Naturally, there's a process that you need to go through. Part of that is the accreditation day and some other elements, but you can certainly come and talk to us about that